everybody. Thank you all for coming to the meeting and also joining on Zoom. We start the meeting by first of all, looking at agenda item number 1. Are there any declarations of interest? Nope. Thank you. Any apologies for absence?
So we've got Councillor Gould offers apologies tonight, also Abaya Savage and Jay McSherry, and Councillor Stringer will probably be joining much later.
Right, thank you. We now move on to agenda item number 3, minutes of previous meeting. What we'll do is we'll take the minutes of previous meeting, and if there are any matters arising on each page. Page 3. Page 4. Page 5. Page 6.
It's a long one.
Page 7. Yes, Councillor. Do you have a question? No. Yeah, okay, 7. Page 8. Page 9. And the final page is only 3 lines. Assume there are no matters arising from the minutes of the last minute. Is it agreed that the minutes should be signed? Okay, thank you. We now move on to agenda item number 4, tackling violence against women and girls. And I will ask Zoe, the lead domestic abuse officer, to do a presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Evening all, my name is Zoe Gallen. I am the lead for domestic abuse and VALG, which is violence against women and girls. I sit within the community safety team, and it was really to give you an overview of some of the work that's happening in the VALG arena at the moment. I'm going to share my screen, and fingers crossed technology works. I'm hoping you can all see that. Let's move that out of the way.
Yeah, thanks, so we can see it.
Yeah, real. I'm hoping it's nice and clear for everyone. So it was really to give you an overview. What does Safer Merton do for, around the work around VALG? And we've got a number of strands that we look after around domestic abuse and VALG. So we manage the VALG Strategic Board, which is a quarterly meeting. Jane McSherry, the Director for Children's, is the chair for the board, and that's the board that looks at what our priorities are, what our work streams look like, but also monitoring our commission services. Within the team, we also look after the VALG strategy and action plan, and as Edith said, Everest said this earlier, it's come at a really good time. As of 10:01 this morning, our new VALG strategy was launched. It was out on a press release, and I've sent it out to lots of partners. And that sets out our next 3 years around what we'd like to achieve within the VALG agenda. I think for most people, they will kind of fully understand the domestic abuse part, but it also, under the new VALG plan, it also covers sexual violence, honour-based violence, forced marriage, violence against women and women and girls safety, and a few others. But if I'll send the link out, and Everett can share it with you all, and you can all have a look at the strategy. We've also got the responsibility for running the MARAC, and it's the Multi-Agency Risk Assessment Conference. And it's a high-risk case panel that looks at our most highest risk cases we have in Merton, and it runs every 3 weeks. And we have on average, it's about 500, 550 cases a year that we look at. We've continually kind of look to raise awareness around domestic abuse and the other forms of VULG, and we ensure that we meet our statutory requirements. We've got a couple of them now. One of them is the new Domestic Abuse Act that came out last year, and the other one is around domestic homicide reviews. So if someone is murdered, whether that's by a intimate partner or family member, and it's deemed domestic abuse, we then have a statutory duty to run a review on that murder, and if there's anything we can learn from it. And we've also most recently, probably within the last 12 months, started focusing a lot more around our women and girls safety. And I'll go through and explain what we've been up to around that. So within the strategy, we've got our 5 objectives for the next 3 years. So it's to raise awareness and a coordinated partnership working, to prevent VULG and domestic abuse through early intervention, support victims, survivors and their children, holding perpetrators to account for their behaviour, and improving the safety of women and girls. And like I said, there's a link there, but I'll also ask Everett to share the strategy with you all after the meeting. I'm conscious you probably can't see that on the screen, but I know you've got it in your packs, but I thought it was really good to kind of list you some of the VULG, you know, the subjects within VULG and what we're looking at and what the definitions are, so that everyone can understand what they all are. I think for Merton, we've for many years, rightfully so, focused on domestic abuse, and it's our highest victim rate. But it's good now to look at the other forms of VULG. So it's good to have those kind of definitions so we all know what we're talking about. Under the domestic abuse, I think lots of people are familiar with domestic abuse because we've been talking about it for many years now in Merton. As part of the work I do, we commission services. So currently we have victim support who provide our community IDVA service, and they are independent domestic violence advocates, and they work with victims and survivors of domestic abuse, offering support, safety planning and practical advice. We've also got our refuge that is run by Hestia. And they support any woman fleeing across the whole of the UK, really, coming to Merton as a safe place. And I've popped the contact details and further details around domestic abuse. I think it's really key to highlight that within domestic abuse, we also support male victims. And we do have a fairly high number of male victims. So it's roughly about 75% of our victims are female and about 25% are male. And it's really important for me, for us as a service, that someone is in trouble, someone's hurting, someone's being abused. We want to support them the best we can, whether that's via our local services or we partner up with some of our London-wide services. Like I said, the Domestic Abuse Act came out in May, July 2021. I think 21's a bit of a blur for all of us. It now puts some new statutory duties in place, and as part of that, we now have a statutory duty to provide support for victims and survivors. And I think Merton, has been doing it for many, many years. And it's just how we improve those services. There's also new duties around housing. So if someone presents to a homeless team around what they're due to station. And there's a couple now scheme that is used. So a victim or survivor can work with the police and say, I believe, and they can disclose any previous history around that perpetrator. It's a very regulated scheme. And if you wanted more information, you can have a look at it on the Met Police website. They've got some leaflets and some documents on there around what it does, what the scheme is, and how someone can apply for it. And the other one that I haven't put on there, but it's really key to highlight, non-fatal strangulation is now a new crime type for the police forces, which holds kind of higher penalties, which I know that the domestic abuse world has been kind of calling for many years because of what we see with our victim survivors. And I have put a link there to the government's act. It's a really long act, and you're welcome to sit and have a read. I do have a shortened presentation if anyone wants it, and it's just a summarised presentation around some of the key points in the Domestic Abuse Act. And I'm happy to share that if anyone wants to sit and read the summarised version. And like I said, our MARAC runs every 3 weeks. We discuss the highest risk cases. It is a panel made up of police, health, probation, social care, our domestic abuse services, and our aim is to reduce the risk of serious harm or death. So our aim is that as partners, we can discuss a case and look at what we can put in place as professionals that's going to reduce the risk to that victim. And like I said, it discusses around 500 to 550 cases a year. I think it all falls in quite nicely. We're currently in our 16 days campaign, which runs out on Saturday. And during the campaign, it's about raising awareness around domestic abuse, around VAUG related crimes. And for us as Merton Council, we share those services out. So every day we put a tweet out with services that might be relevant to our residents. And during that campaign, we will have kind of events and things going on. And like I said, our strategy was launched today. 25th of November, we launched our white ribbon accreditation, and I'll explain a little more about it. So it's a really good kind of period for us to share with residents and partners some of the good work that we're doing, but also just to raise awareness for our residents around what domestic abuse is and what VAUG is. So white ribbon. White ribbon is, it's an organisation that was set up by men to be allies towards women, to support women. And it's about preventing violence by men against women. And I think there's been a lot in the media and there's been lots happening around sexual harassment, nighttime economy safety. So for us, we were really pleased that we were accredited, and there's a number of steps you have to go through to be accredited. And there's an action plan that we will have to follow over the next 3 years to ensure that we're meeting what we said we would meet in those 3 years. I've popped the little poster up here just so that you can see it. It's this year's poster. It's been out and about across the whole of the UK, and Wimbledon Football Club also popped it in their match day programme from their Saturday's match, which was really good. And they're going to be making the promise and working with us around some of their youth teams and how we can work with them to kind of look at their behaviours, to look at young men's behaviours as we go through the next 3 years. And I would say to anyone, please have a look at the website, please have a read up on it. Please wear a white ribbon if you've got one. If not, I can make sure there's some available in the Civic Centre for you. And I always say, please go on and make the promise. The more that make the promise around becoming allies and never using or excusing, men's violence against women and girls, I think the more of us that are signed up to it, the better. And I'm conscious there's a little QR code, which probably looks like little dots for you all. But in your handouts, you can scan that QR code. I think one of the other really good funding streams we've had this year is the Safer Streets funding. Merton, Richmond, Kingston and Wandsworth, we jointly bid for this money to the Home Office, and they've been releasing money every year around the Safer Streets project that they have, and it is about making our residents feel safer in the streets. And this year's round was around women and girls safety, and mainly in the nighttime economy, but also about helping to change cultures and behaviours within the borough. And of that funding, we've had a number of projects up and running. So the first one that's been running, and there was actually a session today, was the Boys to Men training. So it's for anyone, any professional working with young men, and it's about addressing their behaviour, their language, and we've had a number of professionals go on it. So we've had our youth offending team, we've had some probation officers go on it, and we've also had some of our community projects go on it. So that's, you know, a really good training session that we're hoping to run again next year for other professionals. As part of that money, we also have been training our nighttime economy staff around vulnerability and anti-sexual harassment. And it was really to help staff in those businesses kind of see what if someone looks vulnerable, what do you do? How do you call things out? And I think it falls in really nicely. Some of you may have seen the government's Enough campaign, and it is just really kind of highlighting how people can all play a part, however big or small. The other thing that we'll be developing next year is our nighttime strategy. So that will be a safety strategy around our nighttime economy and how we can make it as safe as possible for all residents that use our nighttime economy, but kind of with that focus of the women's safety. We've also had a mouse survey go out. It closed at the end of November, and it was asking men for their thoughts and comments and suggestions around how they behave with women, how they would want to become allies, and what they would like to see in terms of women's safety. And on the back of that, we also had focus groups with some of our victims and survivors of any form of VOG to see what their views were around kind of sexual harassment in the street, domestic. So we had a really wide range of survivors, and what the plan is all this information together, shape our kind of communications and our training programs going forwards. The other thing that come out of it, and I know that it's really short notice because it's tomorrow, we've also got some bystander training for our community. And again, that's very similar to the training we've given our nighttime economy staff. And it's about, if you're out and about and you see something that's not quite right, what do you do? How do you do it? Is it safe for you to intervene? Is it not safe? And I know for a lot of our residents, if they see something, they want to help, but they just don't know how. So the bystander training is one way of kind of upskilling our community. And you can click on the links in your packs that you get. It should be live, those links, but it is on Eventbrite as well, so you can book on it that way. Let's unshare because then I can see you all. That's the only thing when you share, everything vanishes, doesn't it? But I think it was really just to give you kind of an overview of what Merton's been doing. And it's been a really busy year in terms of kind of domestic abuse and VOG. And I think that awareness raising has just kind of amplified over the last 12 months. And what with our strategy, there'd be kind of a heightened kind of consultation, I suppose, with our practitioners and our residents. And the action plan will be coming out next year, and I'll be working with our frontline practitioners to see that we've got our action plan right, or how can they help feed into what we're trying to achieve. So we will be asking kind of our practitioners and our residents. And like I say, the mouse survey and the survivors groups information will also help feed some of that work that we're doing. I think that's everything from me as a quick overview. It's quite a lot to kind of give you in one go. And just to say, VORG is violence against women and girls. The government has also got a strategy out for male victims at the moment as well. And like I said, for us, it is a violence against women and girls strategy and focus. But we understand that we've got male residents that are also victims too, and we can have male residents that are victims of domestic abuse or forced marriage or honour-based violence. And we would always support any male coming forward to any of our services. So it's always good to highlight that.
Thank you, Zoe, for this very extensive presentation which you have done tonight. Obviously, it's very important, as we can see from the news on the television, that violence against women and girls is, taken a very high priority in domestic abuse. And are there any questions for Zoe? Yes, Miss. Yes. Do you want to? Yeah, the silver button. At the bottom. At the bottom. The silver one at the bottom.
Yeah. Oh, how did you do that?
We can see you now.
I got two questions really. Thank you very much for your presentation. My background is mental health, lecturing in mental health for a number of years. And I just wanted to find out whether in your current work, is there any direct correlation between actual mental health issues within the family and the presence of abuse, either male or female? And the second question, is culture a factor in the way that you have tabulated your evidence? Cultural differences, does that come up in your work relating to identifying the problem and how to work collaboratively with communities to address the issue? Thank you.
Lovely, thank you for both. I'll start with the mental health question. I think what we see is that mental health, substance misuse, they are all factors in looking at the risk around domestic abuse. But I think we just have to bear in mind that it doesn't cause domestic abuse, but it is a factor. We work really, really closely with our mental health teams and our Merton Uplift teams around some of the residents they're supporting and making sure that if domestic abuse is disclosed, that person gets the right support that they need. And we are always mindful, if we're supporting a victim or a survivor and the perpetrator has mental health, we're also kind of looking at what support is in place for that perpetrator, because we know if we can support them, obviously it's going to keep our victim survivors safe. So it is a factor, and I think we've all seen kind of mental health increase over the last couple of years, and I think for a lot of our victim survivors, their mental health has suffered, whether that's low mood, depression, post-traumatic stress, and I think it is just making sure that we are always kind of linked in with the right mental health teams. They sit on our Violence Against Women and Girls, our VORG board. They also sit very closely on our MARAC, our high risk case panel. But our domestic abuse team also works really closely with them. And we've got a domestic abuse worker that is kind of specialised in the mental health and the substance misuse, and they will work out about those teams on a regular basis, so we can make sure we've got those crossovers. And it's just making sure that our residents, whether it's our victims, survivors or our perpetrators, are being supported appropriately by our mental health teams. So I hope that answers that first one. The second question around kind of the cultural factors and differences, I think we do see that within our domestic abuse cases, with our kind of forced marriage and our honour-based cases. I think there is a cultural factor to them. I think when you look at culture, it covers all of us, really. You know, you can think the traveling community, they've got their own culture, their own community. And I think when you look at people individually and you see their different communities and cultures, they will all those will play a factor with some of our cases. You know, a lot of our victims and survivors will say, you know, I've been married 40 years and you know, divorce, you don't leave for one of our victims. We do is, you know, a part in supporting them and making sure that we understand what that means for them. And I think our domestic abuse workers are very good at working with our victim survivors to understand their world so that we can help make it safe for them. And we work with a lot of other partners. So we work with an organisation called ICRO, which is the Iranian and Kurdish Women's Rights Organisation. And they specialise in Iranian and Kurdish women's support. We also work with Forward, who is a national charity that works with African, Caribbean women and supporting them most appropriately. And I think it is about just looking at our survivor as an individual and looking at what support they need, and we will find that support whether it's within Merton or outside of Merton. So I hope that answers them.
Right, thank you, Zoe. I've got 3 people wanting to ask questions, Zoe. 4 people. Shall we take it in twos?
Yep.
You know, first of all, we'll start with Reverend Hannah Neal, and then next will be Logie. Thank you.
Right, thank you for your presentation, Zoe. It's really a follow-on from something that Edward has just mentioned, and it's the issue, obviously, of culture. And I wondered how much work was done with people, men particularly, when they come into the country, because it seems that some of the problems that arise is that people don't really know what is expected of them. They don't know what the culture is in the country they've come into. So we've always advocated that the best thing to do is to catch people as soon as they come into the country and help them through the difficulties that they would have. The people who come from countries where it's perfectly acceptable to beat women up. So what are you doing in terms of catching people right at the beginning of their stay in Britain?
So I think for us, it's around just educating our community, isn't it? It's educating our residents around what is and isn't acceptable, what should and shouldn't be done. I think it's really hard to capture people as they're coming into the country. So that's why we would like to do lots more community training, whether it's with men or women, around what is domestic abuse, what is VOG, you know, what is the social norms, what isn't, what is human rights, what is the lead, you know, the criminal side, what is a crime in the UK. And I think over the next kind of 3 years around our VOG strategy, it's one of the big parts of our strategy is around how do we educate our residents around these issues, because I think it is about education, and it's starting of a young age around that kind of good relationships and, you know, anti-bullying. What does a healthy relationship look like? So I think it is that early age upwards education, but also I think it is about educating our residents and making sure that, you know, those messages are going out that domestic abuse is not acceptable. It is a crime. And some of our other forms of VOG. I think if you've got any suggestions, Hannah, please, by all means, drop me an email, because I think it'd be really good to hear if you've got any kind of suggestions or any ideas. And I think that's what the VOG strategy is going to do for the next 3 years, is open that conversation with our partners and with our communities around what do they want to see, what should we be doing. So I think that kind of education piece will be really big over the next 3 years.
Thank you.
Logie?
Yeah, so I mean, it's a nice presentation, but my concern is every time I open the newspaper, I see so many domestic abuse. I feel the police are very late to act sometimes. even they get the message, they wait for a week before they act again, and then already a crime is committed. So I don't know how do they solve this problem.
I think just to say, I work really, really closely with our Southwest BCU policing. I have to say our safeguarding team, or as some of us that have been here a really long time know it as the CSU, we've got really, really good relationships with our CSU. And I know that we're working really, really closely with them at how they can kind of improve their service to our victims and survivors. I know that the Met has got a violence against women and girls plan at the moment on what they can do to help kind of allow women and girls to feel safer while we're walking the streets. And I think it's really to highlight, you know, we've had a case recently, it's been in Mine Merton and other bits of places. We had a really awful domestic abuse case, and Merton Council worked really, really closely with the police, and the perpetrator was sentenced to 18 years in prison. So I think that shows that there's a really, really good partnership. And I think the more we work together with the same goal, I'd like to think we are going to then achieve what we want to achieve. But I think, you know, like you've said, policing resources are stretched. So it is about how can we all help each other to make sure that our victims and survivors are safe.
I got two more questions. Grace and Councillor Galea.
Good evening. Thank you so much for that. It was very, very insightful. I'm particularly pleased to hear how you're tackling honour abuse.
Yeah.
But my concern is how, I mean, you're obviously doing your job as an organisation, but really, if you're in that scenario, how do you reach those people to have the confidence to reach out to you, and how do they know how to find you? Because in the first instance, I think most people think police, but you know, what is the advertising around, you know, letting people know that you have a service and you're there and you're really there to support? That was my first one.
Yeah.
And then I'm sorry, I missed the beginning of your presentation, so I don't know whether this is just domestic abuse as in the home, but you did talk about on the streets. And my next part then, if it's general abuse, what about within the school system? Because sexual abuse is massively on the rise.
Yeah.
And that's a real concern.
Yeah. First question, definitely, you have the same thoughts as I do every single day. How do we reach our survivors? How do we, you know, make it prominent to our residents that there are support services out there? I think what we find, victims of going into our services. Sometimes a victim, and many years ago, she went in, so was about let's get her to find that support. And I think it's about understanding how do we get that message out? And I think lots of communication, whether it is kind of leaflets, and I'm a real advocate of physical leaflets. Not everyone is social media, you know, not everyone is techie. So I'm really, you know, conscious about how do we get that information out there. But you normally find it is a lot of the cases that come to us, like I say, come via a GP. Someone may go via victim support or one of the other charities, and that's how it's picked up. But a lot of the time it is when they're at that crisis point and the police are called, and then that's how the referrals sometimes come into us. But it is something I'm really conscious on about. How do we get our messages out, and where do we get them out to, and in what format, so that people can see them. I think with honour-based violence, with any kind of form of domestic abuse, there's obviously an element of coercive control for our victim survivors. So they may have limited sight on many things. So we know that, like I say, a lot of our victim survivors will talk to their GP as a first point of call. So we've been doing lots of training with our GPs and I know it as the CCG, but it's the Integrated Care Board now, around how do our medical professions know how to identify domestic abuse, honour-based violence, and what to do with that when they've got, you know, a case in front of them or a disclosure. but again, over the, especially for over the next 12 months, that will be one of my other focuses, is that communications and that awareness raising to our professionals and our residents, because we know that some of our residents will go to our health services. They will walk into our children's services, centres, and ask for help. So it is something that is always on my mind when I'm thinking about communications. In terms of the schools, so thinking about the wider piece of violence against women and girls, and the sexual harassment, the catcalling, and the sexual violence within schools, I'm working really closely with our schools at the moment around work that's being done in the schools around raising the awareness around sexual abuse, sexual harassment, within the schools, and that is part of what we're going to be doing with the VORG strategy, and how we can work better with the schools to help flow that education, that awareness raising down to our schools. And I think we are really aware that, for a lot of our female students, they don't always feel safe in school, and it's what can we do to improve that so our schools feel safe for them. So there will be lots more work going on within our schools. And our youth parliament, I'm having conversations with our youth parliament at the moment and our young scrutiners around how they can help be little allies in the schools and the colleges. Because as we know, young people won't want to talk to us adults, but actually if we can use our youth parliament and our youth scrutinisers to help with some of that, we're going to get the message across probably a lot better than me going into schools talking to young people.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, Zoe. We met the other week, actually, when you were on the day of the White Ribbon lunch. And I know how, busy and under-resourced you are. So the question is not necessarily an attack to you. I'm just curious on two things. So you mentioned that there are roughly 75% women and 25% men who are abused. Does that mean that the perpetrators are 75% men and 25% women? And that's mostly to understand, just trying to understand the demographic of perpetrators. So we may potentially, I don't know, if we know what to look out for, maybe we can try and, avoid situations before they, they escalate. And so that's one question. And sorry, I've got a second question.
Okay.
You kind of covered, education at school. And I know it's a bit wider, but we talk about a lot about domestic abuse, but and I know again we're under research, so but are we doing anything for the safety of women and girls in the street, especially after the Sarah Everard's last year? Are we at school, in the schools potentially, are we teaching them, giving them the tools to recognize, the tools to keep safe and recognize certain behaviors, potentially at home as well? And giving them the tools to connect with you as well. Thank you. That's it.
No, that's okay. Lovely to see you again. So I was thinking about this the other day, actually, the 75-25 split. Like I say, it fluctuates between 75 and 25%. And when I looked at some of our data and some of our MARIC data as well, majority of that 75% of female victims, there's a male perpetrator. There's the odd one or two where that male perpetrator may be a son, or it may be a daughter that is the perpetrator. And the 25% with male victims, majority of them are female perpetrators, with the odd kind of couple of same sex. So you generally see that kind of female victim, male perpetrator, or male victim, female perpetrator. But we do have the odd case kind of in between where it's same sex, or like I said, it's a daughter perpetrating against a mother, or a niece perpetrating against an auntie, in one case that we've had. And talking about the tools and the education in schools, I think that's some of the work we are looking to kind of focus on going forward, is around educating what is that behaviour? What does it look like? How can you identify that that is sexual harassment? For some young people, they may just think it's normal behaviour, and it's how do we kind of take that normalisation away and actually kind of recognise that it is sexual harassment. Some of that work, like I said, is being done via the Boys to Men training. So it's about professionals working with young men and kind of calling them out on some of the language, some of the behaviours. It's also about educating our community around the differences and our bystander training. But it will also be looking at our school, take the schools that already know lots of this work, but then how do we put that in when we're teaching? We also as well as our cadets as well to help.
Sorry, Will.
Sorry, we're getting, I think she's having difficulties with her, IT. Have we lost her?
Am I there?
Yes, you're here again. Thank you.
Oh, we're all having IT difficulties today. There's a gremlin in the system. Did you catch the end of that, councillor?
She didn't catch the end of it.
Oh, so the
You want to
piece.
repeat that? Can you hear me, Zoe?
Yes, I can hear you.
Can you want to repeat the end of what you were saying?
Yeah, so the end part about the schools and educating young people. So some of that work we're doing with our schools so that our schools can be educating those young people, but it's also about working with our young people to educate them on what is acceptable behaviour, what is sexual harassment. I think you probably missed the bit. We're working with our Safer Schools officers that are in our secondary schools, and we're going to be working with our police cadets as well around how we can educate young people. And it's all coming out as part of that Safer Streets funding that we've got. So we'll be using some of that funding going forward to do some of that education piece with our young people.
Thank you so much, Zoe. Very extensive presentation. And obviously, any updates you have, you will circulate it with everyone. Thank you so much. We now move to agenda item number 5, police update by Inspector Andrew Martin from the Met. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Drew.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. I'd like to introduce myself. So my name's Drew Martin, or Andrew Martin, as I was born. I am the Safer Neighbourhood Inspector in the Met for Merton Borough. So thank you all for allowing me to join this meeting. It is my first one. So my briefing may not be as thorough as Zoe's, but I will learn for next time and make sure that I try and cover everything that you may want to know. So I won't share my screen because I have all sorts of problems with my
sorry,
laptop cutting
Andrew, is it possible for you to share your screen?
I can certainly try.
Thank you. Your camera on, so we can see you.
Oh, Mike, no, I've literally ordered a new laptop because my camera does not work.
Okay, thank you.
That's right. I will try and share my screen so you can see what I'm looking at. If you bear with me 2 seconds. Nope, that's not going to work. Apologies. If everyone's able to go to page number 21 in the agenda pack, if not, don't worry, because I'm going to go through it anyway. So I'll start off with the TNO, and for anyone that doesn't know what TNO stands for, it's total notifiable offences, and what that means is any offences that we record in our databases. We are required to record any crimes that are reported to us. So when I say anything we report, that will be everything that has been reported to us or everything that we're aware of. So if we see a fight take place, a report will go on, and that's what TNO stands for. So for the financial year to date, So that is starting from April up until now, so for the past 7 months. Richmond, Kingston and Merton are the 3 boroughs in London with the lowest TNOs. Merton are third with 9,566 total, which is just about 100 less than Sutton borough. So that's the first time this happened 6 months ago, and we're still there at the moment. It's the first time this has happened for the past sort of 10 years. So it's really good sort of sign as to how things are going in Merton. There is still a lot more work that can be done, and we want to be even better, but it is a good sign that we're in a good place at the moment, and those stats are, as I say, as low as they have been in 10 years. So I'll go on to burglary. So in Merton this financial year to date, we've had a total of, when I wrote this, obviously that may have changed now, 621 burglaries. So it averages out to being less than 1 burglary per ward per week. For anyone that doesn't know what that means, although we're a borough of Merton, for policing at least, we're broken down into wards. There's 20 wards in Merton. So when I say that averages out to be in less than 1 per week per ward, that means that there's probably just under 20 burglaries in Merton every week. Now that sounds like quite a lot, and I can understand concern, but it's one of those things that we will always look into, and there's trends. So at certain times of the year, and it is normally in the build up to Christmas, because that's when people know that there are more expensive gifts in houses and things like that we have an increase. So that's when we target a lot more of a work around burglaries to make sure that we're giving people the right advice to prevent them from becoming victims of burglary. But we still do work throughout the year as well, and we do work with Safer Merton as well. And one of the things that we're doing is providing vulnerable premises with shed alarms to make sure that they've got increased security. And again, we'll go out, and my local ward teams will provide leaflets and things like that for all the things you can do, whether that's cameras or lights that come on when someone's in the vicinity, to again deter people from wanting to come in. That's all sort of some of the work that we do, just to make sure that we help prevent burglaries rather than just reacting to them and investigating them when they do happen. But for those that do take place, we have got a dedicated burglary team that will help with investigations. They're specially trained, so they'll know different things that they can look out for, and all the other things that we can consider for that investigation to make sure that we have the best chance of finding those that are responsible. We also have our different matrices that we use, where we have certain people that we know are committing burglaries in the area, and we'll make sure that we are doing everything that we can to ensure that they are not actively committing burglaries in the community, to again help to prevent any more from taking place. So this year in Merton, as I say, there has been 621 burglaries in the last 7 months, but that is a 5% decrease to last year, which again is really positive. There have been even larger increases in the other boroughs in the southwest BCU, and that includes Wandsworth, Kingston and Richmond. Wandsworth seen the highest with an 18.7% decrease, but 5% is a very good decrease. And Wandsworth, although it has decreased by 18%, is still nearly double the burglary figures that we've got in Merton. So, a big decrease is really good, but it's definitely a necessary one that we needed to see. I will obviously take all questions at the end, so please do write down any questions you have, but I'll move on and go through things rather than stopping and starting at each point. So I'll move on to robbery. So in Mitcham recently, I was off for November, so one of my colleagues, one of my sergeants, has actually covered all the policing needs for Merton for the past month. But during that last month period, there was a spike in robbery offences in Mitcham. Now, this is attributed to a group of individuals that were using bikes. Some of them were rental bikes, and some of them would be their own bicycles. And just to clarify, I do mean bicycles, not motorbikes. And they would go around to different locations, parks, and things like that. In groups, they would then commit a robbery, and then they could cycle off and obviously use those bicycles to get away quicker. So what we have done is, where we were made aware of that and became aware of the trend of what was happening and how those offences were being committed, we then looked at the areas that were being the offences were being committed in, the times they were being committed at, and made sure that we had resources tactically put around the borough so we could try and identify those individuals. And fortunately, we did manage to get 3 males arrested for those robbery offences. And I don't have the figures to hand because it took place after this report was put on, but that dramatically increased the robberies that took place in Merton, and I attended a meeting earlier just to go through the figures. And Merton, in the past 7 days, has actually been the borough in London with the least robberies that have taken place, with a total of 7. So it averages out as 1 robbery a day, but there's actually been 1 or 2 days where I've had a couple and some without any. So again, you know, unless we're at 0, I can never be entirely happy, but we have to be positive that we are doing the right things, targeting the right people and the right areas to make sure that we reduce those figures as much as possible. So just to go through those stats in a little bit more detail, in the past 12 months in Merton, there's been 457 robberies, which is an increase on the previous 12 months, which, as I say, was largely down to this group of individuals using bicycles in the last couple of months. So we have stopped that trend, but we still need to be conscious that it can increase at any time, and you know that's something we always have to do, to put that education to schools and to pupils, because it is mainly school children that have been targeted. Doesn't mean to say that they're the only ones, but we need to do more to educate schools and the pupils as to how they can prevent themselves from becoming victims, which is something that we're doing and communicating with school leads to figure out how we can do that in the best way possible. And we always need to learn, and that's what we'll be doing. So that's a 30% increase over the previous 12 months, which is a really high number. Absolutely. The one thing that I try not to go over too much what happened in the previous 12 months is because we were still in a bit of lockdown because of COVID. So from 2020 until sort of the middle of 2021, it really skewed the figures. So although it looks like it's a massive increase, that will be partly down to people not coming out of their homes previously, and therefore less robberies taking place. But nevertheless, we have still seen an increase, and it's something that we'll keep looking into. Okay, so I'll move on to my next topic, which is significant incidents. And for anyone that again doesn't know what that means, it just means something noteworthy, something that you know has been in the news, that's a really massive issue that's impacted a lot of people. This won't be the only thing that's happened, but this is the one thing that I would like to cover today, and that is the explosion that happened at Galpins Road in August. For anyone that may not be aware of what happened, there was an explosion, one of the houses on Galpins Road, and sadly there was one little girl who lost her life, and that investigation will be going on for a long time to come now. But in the immediate sort of time frame now, and for the past few months, there has been investigation going on, but also a lot of people impacted by what had happened. We had hundreds of people that were displaced from their homes because of making sure that they were safe, but also for us to conduct that initial part of the investigation. And that is something that had a really big impact on us policing wise as well, because we had to make sure we had officers on the crime scene that was put in place. And also we wanted to make sure we had officers in the vicinity doing some reassurance. And what I mean by that is, for all those people that were forced to leave their homes, I wanted to make sure that we had officers nearby that could answer questions and give them some understanding of what we were doing, rather than them being left in the complete dark. And we absolutely need to be better in the future and learn some more things and improve our communication. But we with the information we had, and you know, with the resources we had, made sure we could do everything possible to make lives of the residents a little bit easier, you know, because it was a really impactful time. And we have the majority of residents back in homes. Those that aren't in at the moment, it is because of the safety of the houses, rather than it being because of the investigation and us needing to have more space for whatever it is we were doing at the time. So all residents should be back, other than the ones that aren't able to go into their homes because they're not safe. But that's, as I say, that'll be an ongoing thing. So we'll be working with the residents that are still displaced, but also the ones that have returned home in the long-term future, and making sure we can do everything to figure out what happened exactly. If there's anyone responsible, then hold them to account. But as I say, make sure that we're doing what we can to improve the lives of the residents that are there. Okay. And moving on to staffing, and what I mean by staffing is the amount of officers we have available. As I mentioned previously, we have 20 wards in the BCU, and part of the Mayor's policing plan was that we have to have 2 PCs or DWOs per ward and 1 PCSO. So that would be a total of 40 PCs and 20 PCSOs. With myself and my sergeants, there would be 1 inspector and 6 sergeants. In Merton, we, as of a month ago, we actually had 14 extra PCs. So we were actually 14 more than we needed. So we had 54. That has gone down now to 46, but we have 6 more PCs than is required of us, which is a positive thing because it means we can do more work. So although some officers were being used for aid centrally, which could be the Just Stop Oil protest, Extinction Rebellion, or now with the World Cup on, they are taken to make sure that we're policing pubs and all sorts of other places where there could be disorder. We still would usually have the right amount of people in the places we needed them. Occasionally there were times where we didn't have as many as we would like, but we were never left without anyone to police the local area, because again, some of them would have been used for response team, and response team are the ones that respond to the 999 calls and make sure that we're doing everything to keep the public safe as well. So that is a positive thing, because as I say, we have got more PCs than we're required to have. And in terms of PCSOs, we were 2 short. We have actually got 4 PCSOs joining us by the end of January. We will also lose 2, but that will then take us to our required 20. And again, that will allow us to be as effective as possible doing our community engagement, but also using our PCSOs, because they are so invaluable to us as an organisation, and they do a fantastic job. Okay, and I'll then move on to stop and search. So in Merton, there's been 2,549 stop and searches in the past 12 months, which is 16.5% reduction compared to the previous 12 months, which is really interesting because, as I mentioned to you, obviously COVID in the past year had an impact and less people were out. So you would think that number would be up because there'd be more people out in this last 12 months. However, because of COVID taking place last year, not taking place last year, but because it being affected last year, when there were people out, officers, when they would then engage with individuals, it tended to be that they had less reason to be out and about, which may have raised officers' suspicion. So that could be one of the reasons. But again, it's one of those things that we will always look into to find out where that reduction's taking place and try and figure out why. But that could be one of the reasons. And on stop and search, one of the things that we always like to make people aware of is that line managers regularly review the body-worn video of officers. So that doesn't mean that every search they conduct will be reviewed, but officers, line managers will randomly select video to look at to make sure they're happy with the standard and understanding of officers when they're conducting stop and search, because that way it makes sure that we are conducting legal stop and searches, and if we're making mistakes, we're learning from them, because we do make mistakes at times, but it's important that we accept that, acknowledge it, and then we learn from it. And what we also have is our senior leadership team, so our superintendents and our chief superintendent, they will also look at body-worn footage at random times to make sure that they are also happy with the standard of searches that are taking place, and if not, then they will challenge the officers that they think need to improve what they're doing. So as I mentioned, from November 2021 to October this year, there was 2,549 stop and searches, which is 16.5% reduction from last year, which was 3,049. In Wandsworth, there were 4,000 stop and searches conducted, Kingston just under 3,000, and Richmond just under 1,000. And I have the stop and search number by demographic. So it is in the agenda pack if anyone wants to look at them or have a record of what I'm saying here today. It is all on there, so don't worry about sort of trying to type it all down. So for the stop and searches in Merton, out of those 2,550, let's say, 1,200 of them were someone of white ethnicity, 1,029 were from black ethnicity, 402 Asian, and 120 of them were other. And by age, the largest group that was stop and searched were 15 to 19-year-olds, which was 891, and 20 to 24-year-olds was second highest, 605 stop and searches. And of the gender that we've got registered here, 2,495 searches were male, 253 were female. And then to break that down so you can sort of see the ratio, as it were, so you can sort of understand the demographics and how they were stop and search per population. So per 1,000 people of a given population, if you were white, then out of 1,000 people, 9.2 people would be stop and search. So that works out as just under 1%. Whereas if you are black, there is 41.7 people that would be stop and searched out of 1,000, which works out as 4.1%. Asian is 11.1 people out of 1,000, so just over 1%, and other 13.2 people, so that's 1.3%, which is, you know, it's a vast difference. One thing that I don't know with these stats, and I'm trying to find out, is although it says 41.7, I don't know if that's different individuals, or if myself, I'm a black male. I don't know if I was stop and search 10 times that all those 10 count, if you see what I mean. So I don't think that there's 41.7 different people that stop and search. That is just the total number of people that are then defined by the ethnic periods as black. But it's still something that we really need to look at to make sure that we're doing the right things, because it does look disproportionate, absolutely. And that's something we need to be conscious of to make sure we are doing the right things. And as I say, then by age, you are the chance of you being stop and search is 8.5%, and gender out of male and female, 25.3, which means 2.5%, or if you're female, then it's 0.2%. And last thing that I'd like to cover is just our public perception survey. Now it's got all of the boroughs for the Met, but I will obviously just go over Merton for this quarter, as well as the quarter from April through to July. So confidence has actually increased from the people that were surveyed, and this is a survey that's done by MOPAC, and for anyone that doesn't know who MOPAC are, it's the Mayor's Office of Police and Crime, and they send this survey out to random members of the public. It's not something in Merton. I will go through the figures, but again, as I say, they're in the pack, so if you do need to look, then they are there. And it's the police can be relied on to be there when needed. There's been a 5% increase. That the police treat you fairly no matter who you are. There's been a 7% increase from 58 to 65%. Dealing with issues that affect the community has increased from 60% to 64%. That the police listen to the concerns of the community has gone up 8% from 60 to 68. That we keep the public well informed has decreased from 42 to 38%. That the community, the people that were surveyed, know who their local ward officer are, has remained the same at 29%, which is really low. It's higher than the average for the Met, definitely a lot higher, but still nowhere near as high as I'd like it to be, because that's a really important one. And then the public believe that we do a good job in their local area has increased from 50% to 52%. And lastly, that we can be trusted has increased slightly from 75% to 76%. So all good increases over the past 3 months. But again, still a lot of work to do, because we can do a lot better. But all that comes with us learning and getting information from people, which is why it was really important for me that I came to this meeting as soon as I found out about it, because I want to understand what's important to everyone. And if people have ideas of how we can improve as a police service, then I know how to do that and implement that in Merton. But that's everything from me. So thank you very much for everyone for listening. And yes, I'm happy to take questions.
Right. Thank you very much, Inspector Andrew Martin, for your very extensive report. I think I would like to place on record my sincere thanks to the police force for all their hard work in relation to the sad incident which happened in Galpins Road, and also for members of your staff who were very active when the incident occurred. And it was sad to see that a young girl was killed and 2 people were still in hospital. And the council also played a pivotal role, together with members of council staff and councillors, for the eastern side of the borough, also played a pivotal role on throughout the months. And the residents were very grateful. And they also, I understand that they thank the MP for Mitcham and Morden, Siobhan McDonough, for organizing a coach to take them to the House of Commons. Some of the victims, who were really pleased that they had a day out in the House of Commons by their MP. So all in all, we were very grateful for all the work that the police did in this very sad incident that occurred in our borough. And also I've noticed from the report which you have given that the police are doing their very best in terms of burglary, which we know has gone up in London as a whole. And I would also like to thank, the police in Martin for their work in, preventing, a lot of burglary to, occur in our borough. I will now take questions from councillors. I can see Councillor McLean. Can we have Councillor McLean first? And then Lodi and Councillor Gillian. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you very much, Drew, for your report. So I'm Councillor McLean, I represent Cannon Hill Ward and also the Conservative Group Leader. And I want to endorse also Councillor Macaulay's comments. Thank you for all that you and indeed your officers do. And I was particularly pleased just to hear you reference the PCSOs, because absolutely, they do an amazing job. And I'm blessed, or the residents I represent are blessed in Cannon Hill with PCSO Sandra Wood, who is an amazing, along with PC Young, and our neighbourhood team is great. I also wanted to pick up on the fact that we have a lot of conversations with my SNT team about the intelligence and getting into schools really early, and identifying the difficulties and getting people before they get potentially onto the wrong path. So I think that's something that we need to welcome. And also I certainly endorse, along with Neighbourhood Watch as well. In fact, I'm always giving my team, PC Young and PCO Wood, a plug, because of course Cannon Hill is the first ward in Merton of those 20 wards you mentioned to have 100% coverage in Neighbourhood Watch. You mentioned a lot of crime, but you didn't mention car crime, and certainly in the ward that I live and represent, it's becoming it is a big issue. And we've just recently had the catalytic converter marking session that was hugely successful, and we looked to roll that out. That was again led by our SMT team. But car crime is growing, and I'd just like to perhaps understand how you're looking to combat that.
McLean, do you want to answer that, please? Are you there, Inspector Andrew Martin?
Can you hear me?
Yes. Are you
fantastic.
take that
Apologies,
question,
I think I was talking muted. Yes, no, thank you very much, Councillor, for the question. So one of the things that we are looking to do, as you mentioned, is the catalytic converter marking schemes. So we have got another one of those authorised from Safer Merton. So they've given us the funding that we can do another one of those. So it is in the middle of being planned at the moment. So we'll look to do that and roll that out in different wards to make sure we can cover as many people as possible. One of the things we'll have to do is identify the most at-risk vehicles, because there's certain types that they're targeted, and we can obviously look through our data, find out which vehicles they are, and target them to try and prevent the people most at risk. So that's absolutely something that we'll do. In terms of other vehicle crime, yeah, you're absolutely right. It wasn't covered in my spreadsheet. It's one of the things that some people or some wards, they have the issue more than others, and it's there's so many things that take place, and some things are important to others that aren't to others. It's hard to cover everything, so no, I completely understand that. In terms of what we're doing, there'll be a variety of different options. So one of the things that I try and encourage my teams to do is, if they've got a problem that's growing on their ward, is to look through those statistics and to make sure that we are patrolling around certain areas at certain times when those offences are taking place. But one of the other issues that we've had from meetings with communities, one of the biggest problems is people aren't reporting those crimes to us, and that is partially down to people having jobs and feeling like they don't have the time, but also down to their confidence in us being able to find the people responsible and deal with it effectively. So that's something that we are really keen to increase and improve on. One of the ways that we're going to do that is obviously by teams going out door to door as part of a way that they're trying to gain contact details of people so we can share information with them. But part of that will be us giving the details. So if people don't call 999 or they don't come to a police station, they have the best way they can, report that crime, so they can do it online, which a lot of people don't know. So we need to make sure that we're encouraging people and supporting people in reporting those crimes, so we know an accurate amount that are taking place. Because, like you say, that there may be an increase, but there may be a lot of offences that we're not aware of because people haven't told us, and that's a real issue, because that's a risk that we then don't know about. And if we don't know about it, we don't do anything, we're going to lose more confidence from people and get less reports. So we need to make sure we're doing everything we can. Does that make sense?
It absolutely doesn't. I know, again, speaking quite closely with my with PC Young and PCSO Wood, it is a frustration. Residents don't sometimes report, and indeed as councillors we get that sometimes as well. It's like, if we don't know about it, we can't sort it out. So fully understand, and thank you very much.
No, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Logie, do you want to ask your question, please?
Yeah, thanks for the presentation. Following Councillor McLaren's this thing, down West Barneswood, there's a lot of car crime, such as exhaust being cut and open, and there's two streets which happens frequently. I just wonder whether they can put any cameras to catch this, because every week you see the report, the two streets are being targeted all the time, which is just near the A3.
Do you want to answer that question, please?
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. Thank you very much for the question. So one of the things that will happen, you may be aware of as I say, because there's different wards, we can't just have a meeting with everyone, that they'll do ward panels. So a specific ward will have their sergeant and some of their PCs and PCSOs will do a ward panel, and they'll set priorities, crime priorities within the area. So that could be robberies, or it could be vehicle crime, could be burglaries. It's whatever they decide. There's normally one priority from the police that we choose, and two will be from the members of that ward panel. So if that's something that you're not signed up to do, then please do contact me after the meeting. I'm more than happy to put you in touch with your local ward team so you can get involved in that. What we will do is we'll utilise, absolutely, if we can get cameras in the area, then we will do that. That's a conversation we have to have with the council, because if it's a fixed camera, so a permanent one, then that is something the council does. The police don't have their own fixed cameras that we have in different locations. They are the council's cameras, and we utilise them by engaging with their CCTV room. What we are using at the moment is something called a Nomad camera, and what that means is essentially it's a portable camera. It's not a portable camera like a handheld one. It is a camera that is good quality, but we can put it into our problem locations, which is one of the things we utilised for the robberies. So as you mentioned, if we've got vehicle crime that we're aware of in a certain area that's going on at a time where we may not be able to be patrolling all the time, then we will absolutely use that most likely, because as I say, these trends move from place to place. So there may be a vehicle crime in a street that we could put a camera down, but the cost may not be justified. So instead, what we will do is use one of those Nomad cameras that we have at the police, or also the council have some. So we'll use them to put them in the area to either identify the person committing the offences, or the people committing the offences, or deter them. And if we deter them, then they obviously move somewhere else, which is why we can then use that camera, move it elsewhere, and that way target the problem elsewhere as well. And if it obviously goes on, then we'll look at different options as well, because we've got designing out crime officers that are specifically trained to find out how we can deter crime. So again, cameras are one way, but it could also be that there's insufficient lighting in a street or in a car park, which is why people go there, because they think they can't be seen even if there is a camera. So it's looking at all the different possibilities as to why people are choosing that area to commit the crime. But no, absolutely, we would definitely look to utilise CCTV, whether that's permanent cameras or.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you.
Do you want to ask the next question, please?
Thank you. Thank you, Andrew. That was very detailed. And I just noticed that we didn't cover response times, which have been recently published for London boroughs. And it appears that Merton is not meeting 2 of the 3 required responses. It obviously underlines our commitment to retaining the Wimbledon police station open. But why do you think we're not meeting these? Is it potentially affected by other pressing matters like the Galpin incident, or yeah, do you have insight into why this is? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Very good question, and it's a really important one as well, because as you mentioned, you know, it's one of our commitments, and the response times are really important because that's people calling us because they are most likely, you know, if it's for people that don't know, we have different graded calls. So an I grade is a call that requires us to get there within 15 minutes of the call being made. An S grade is 60 minutes of that call being made, and we have an E grade, which is 24 hours. So it's a really important one. I mean, I can only speculate. I can't give an absolute reason as to why our response times are where they are. One of the things that I have always found frustrating is, as I say, that 15 minutes that we have to get to that call is from the moment the call's made. And sometimes there's a delay because the call handler can't get the information necessarily from the person that's calling, because they could be in danger, or they may not be able to give the information really clearly because there might be a language barrier, and we have to figure that out. So it could take, you know, up to 10 minutes before we're even made aware of the call. And I say we, I mean the officers that are actually going to respond. So the officers that are on in their cars around the borough with their radios, the call will come out and they will ask for officers to attend. The officers will put up straight away and say, yes, we're available. Sometimes there's not officers free, absolutely. So I'm not making out as if, you know, it's the only reason that we don't get to calls. But officer could say, yeah, absolutely, I'm free, I'm round the corner, get there within 6 minutes. But because it took 10 minutes for us to be made aware, we've missed that time, that charter time of 15 minutes. And that's how it's recorded. We can't change that. You know, that is how we're asked to report it, because if people make the call and it takes us 60 minutes to get there, that is how long it takes us to get there. But the officers, it could only actually take them 6 minutes. So that's one of the things which can impact it. As you mentioned, one of the other things could also be not having loads and loads of officers. So during COVID, where there wasn't events going on, so there weren't sporting events, there weren't music events or festivals, any other things, we had sometimes 70 officers, and too many. There weren't enough cars. Understandably, because it's unprecedented for us to have that many people just patrolling around the town. So one of the things that changes obviously is with us having the Galpins Road explosion and providing officers there. If we have the protest Just Stop Oil or Extinction Rebellion, now with the World Cup, we have officers that are assigned to that. So that can obviously impact our response times, and we have to prioritize the calls that we go to. So if you look at, as I say, the S grades, which could be, S grade normally means there's not immediate risk for anyone that doesn't understand. And by that, I mean, if there has been an assault, the suspect may have left 10 minutes ago, and therefore it's not graded as we need to be there straight away because the risk to that person may be gone. And it's constantly reviewed. But one of those things that we'll have to do is prioritize. So if someone says, look, my partner is at home and they are beating me up, then we absolutely need to go to that call, and we have to figure that out. And that's something that sometimes we get wrong, and we may go to the one that wasn't as bad, but we can only go on the information that we're given. And sometimes people give us the wrong information, whether it's on purpose or not isn't the point. Sometimes we just go to calls because of the information we're given, and in hindsight, we go to other ones, and we would probably be able to get to more because of the time that it takes to deal with them. But that's one of the reasons. But I can only speculate, and I don't want to speculate too much because there's a lot of hard work that the response teams do to try and get to as many calls as possible and as quickly as possible. So it's not something I like to speculate on too much, because it's not also the role that I do in neighbourhoods, because it is response team, so it's not something I look at as much as well. But that's a couple of the things that can impact times.
Right. Thank you very much for your extensive report, Inspector Andrew Martin, and would like to extend a sincere thanks to you for providing safety for our community in Martin. And we look forward to seeing you again in the next few months. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is agenda item number 6, Windrush 75th anniversary planning, and that's going to be dealt with by Everett Willis, the Equality and Community Cohesion Officer. Thank you.
Sorry, good evening, everyone. And again, thank you to the previous speakers. Just to quickly update you, in November, a group of council officers, we had some councillors and community representatives met to start to think about how we can commemorate and celebrate next year's 75th anniversary of the arrival of the Empire Windrush. We had quite an extensive discussion and some really interesting ideas have started to come through. And what I'd like to do is just to get the JCC to note the discussion and the ideas that we've come up with so far and to comment on them also. During the discussion, a number of themes were emerging and it became quite clear that some of the ideas are clustered around education, celebration, and also heritage. From an education point of view, we had a thought that we could get school children to go and visit the Windrush statue that's in Waterloo Station, for instance. There's also going to be a race equality conference next year for young people, and just sort of linking in there and just talking about Windrush, just showcasing that a little bit. There was also concern expressed that a number of people probably still haven't received their compensation, and the borough needs to do a bit more, have a bigger push just to promote the advisory services that are available to support people to make successful claims, because obviously we can't be celebrating when there are people still suffering and not getting what they're entitled to. In terms of celebrating, when we did commemorate in 2019, we had a couple of celebratory events, and the idea was that we could probably do something similar. Back in 2019, we used data and realized that the largest Caribbean population are in the Graveney ward, and there was a church in the Graveney ward that had a service, and then it was a sort of eat and greet at the end of it, and perhaps we could do something similar too. One of the people on the call, Michael, he was part of the discussion, and he has a five-a-side theatre production company, and there's some work being done around Windrush that will be performed at the New Wimbledon Theatre. So that's something also. And we had a conversation about capturing a film, maybe having local people do a film of, you know, born in, I don't know, Jamaica, but made my home in Merton, and just being able to showcase how people's experiences, you know, they've come from the Caribbean and how they've sort of shaped local life here in Merton. Also, a big part of the conversation was also around heritage, and we had the thought of perhaps having Merton's equivalent to the blue plaques you see across London, having purple plaques. And there's an officer who works in the Heritage Centre who's currently bidding for funding to do something similar. So we just thought it'd be good if we could perhaps link all that in with Windrush. And again, Michael on this call talked about some sort of Black History walks that he does currently. So again, we were thinking, well, this is something that ties in nicely. Because there are so many ideas, it feels like we need to have a program of events, and perhaps the 22nd of June next year could be the launch. Some of the activities could continue on to Black History Month, so we're doing things over a period of months. In terms of funding, in the past, we've successfully gained Windrush Day celebration funds from the government, and we're hoping that we could do something similar again. That fund isn't open until I think next February. There's nothing on the website at the moment, but what we'd be doing would be sort of working collaboratively, because the council couldn't apply on its own, but because we'd be working with a lot of voluntary sector organisations and even schools. We're also trying to get schools involved as well. There's an officer who works in the Children's Schools and Families Division, and her role will be to try and link in schools as best as possible. But I was quite excited at the end of the conversation, just because we generated that many ideas and they all seem quite doable. But to be successful, we need a number of people getting involved. We also thought if there's any activities, planned activities, and what we could do was just again continue to showcase Windrush. Councillor Stringer was part of the meeting, and she mentioned, for instance, that next year we're going to have the Mitcham Carnival, and Carnival is a big thing in the Caribbean, for instance. So it would again be, I think, timely to include Windrush as a possible theme. So as I said, in terms of the funding, we're planning to bid for funding, and also some of the organisations getting involved, they could bid for funding in their own right from perhaps Merton Giving. We're also thinking of approaching businesses to see if local business will also sponsor us, just to be able to put on the programme of activity. But as I said, the next meeting, there's an error, I'm sorry for the error in the papers, it's actually the 12th of January is the next steering group meeting. And what we're planning to do is just to meet as regularly as possible. By the next meeting, some of the ideas will be firmed up a little bit more so that we could have a bit more detail and be able to sort of shape a programme. Because at the moment, it's quite an extensive list that we will need to cut down just to make it viable, really. So I just really wanted to sort of share that with the JCC, let you know what's happened since the last one. You know, the fact that we've had a very productive discussion. And if there's anyone else who would like to get involved in the planning, then please let me know. And what I'll be doing is at each one of the JCCs, just giving an update and the meeting, just so that you know what's going on and what's planned. But other than that, there's not a lot more to say, so I'm happy to take any comments or questions that you may have.
Thank you, Everett. Does anyone have any question? Councillor Gillian.
I thank you. That's it sounds like there's been a lot of work, and there's going to be a lot of work around this, which is fantastic. And I hope you're successful with all the funding requirements. I guess I just have maybe a comment or a request to make sure that the activities are within all of the borough, and so that we really educate everyone about it, and every community, and we break down barriers and gain better understanding across communities. Thank you.
Thank you. I think the education bit is quite key. That's exactly what we said needed to be done, so that the opportunity is there. We'll be putting some communication out as well, for instance. So our communications team will be tweeting things. We'll have something in My Merton, but it's right across the borough. The aim is just to let people know that the Caribbean population have been here for some time, and their very positive contributions to the borough as well, and just showcasing that. So that the point is well made. Thank you.
Councillor Nick McLean.
Thank you, Chair. And I endorse all the work you're doing, Everett. I know that education, everything, and spreading the word is something that's right at the forefront of everything you do, and that just want to welcome that and endorse it. Thank you.
Thank you. I mean, the other point to say is, obviously, as councillors, what I'll be doing when the programme is sort of been shaped up, I will be sharing that with yourselves, and in turn you can share that with your constituents as well.
Else have any questions? I can see no hands up. No? Right. Thank you. Now move on to agenda item number 7, any other business? No? No other business? Right. So thank you all tonight for coming to this meeting on a very cold evening, and I wish you all a happy Christmas in advance and a safe journey home. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Merry Christmas to everyone too.
Thank you. I endorse what councillors just said, and thank you for your support in 2022 as well. Thank you. Take care, everyone. And thanks for coming tonight, keeping me company in the council chamber. Right.